Hey y'all, it's Dave Peretz, the Fund CXO and founder of Signal Fund Services. Today we're continuing our series on the minimum viable venture fund operations with episode 6, hiring timeline. So if you're a GP, LP, service provider, fund operator, or founder curious about how modern venture funds are built and operated, this series is for you. So in today's episode, we're going to continue on the conversation from episode 5, which was who to hire in the back office. Today, we're going to focus more on when people hire those roles in their back office. And so, to put some context around this, we did a data deep dive. We did a research project on LinkedIn combined with public fund announcements and some SEC FINRA data to build a database and see if there were any patterns that emerged from how venture funds have actually hired over the last 5 or 10 years. This is observational data that we got from public sources to see what the map would actually look like. And the idea here isn't necessarily to be proscriptive and say this is how you should hire or this is the order it should go in, but rather it's to give GPs something to pivot off of. Instead of giving you a blank sheet of paper and say, figure it out, we're hoping that these templates can at least say, I like that part of how that firm hired, or that makes sense to hire that way for my firm, and you can pick and choose and make informed decisions. Now, in this research project, what we did is we looked at both people and firms, and we looked at over 30 data points. For people, it's when did they take the job? How long were they in the seat? What job did they take before and after? What schools did they go to? What employers did they have prior to? For the firms, we thought about breaking them into buckets, sub $50 million, dollars, 50 to 250, and then 250 and above, thinking that there are different budgets associated with each of those bands. And we wanted to make sure that there was a representative sample. And so we really kind of scoured for the best data set that we could build. We looked at all types of jobs, not just back office roles, but anything that really wasn't just a GP to make sure that we were including value add positions, finance and operations positions, as well as just business management and venture partners. And then what did we learn? There were a lot of takeaways, and we will try to summarize them the best we can. But there is no one right way to hire and build your firm. There are lots of, mistakes that people make, and we will talk through some of them today. All right. So, what does the timeline look like for a firm? What you're seeing here is, roughly a timeline starting with year one and fund one, which is often a proof of concept for GPs. You start out with just the two general partners or the solo GP, and then they look to complement a skills gap. Either it's the capacity to do some of the tasks that they would need a back office person to handle, or it's a functional skills challenge where they're trying to hire someone that complements them. And what we recommend is usually like a chief of staff or a multifunctional associate is what we see as that first hire. Um, and then as you grow and mature and you're moving from proof of concept to operationalizing your product market fit, GPs will often bring in more senior, experienced hires, and they might have titles like VP or head of. And initially, what we find is right after funds close on Fund 2, they're thinking about operations. They're thinking about deal flow. And so the types of folks they tend to hire are focused on operations and increasing the deal flow. And then as you mature in Fund 2 and you're getting ready for those institutional roles as your portfolios are building and maturing, the need for additional value add services or to manage those services becomes apparent, and people start to hire heads of platform or talent or marketing. Now, one caveat is people aren't hiring all of these roles. They're making their choice, but these are roughly at the times of when firms are making this choice, as you can contextualize with your own experience. So it's not everybody, but when they do hire, this is where they typically hire them. And then lastly, as you move out into institutional land, as you're establishing your differentiation both for founders and for LPs, you start to make more strategic choices. And now in our world, in the finance and ops world, one of the big choices that GPs are faced with is whether to continue to use service providers for basic functions like fund admin and tax, or to in-house, bring that stuff back into the firm, and at which point you're hiring a team to manage it. And usually what happens in that case is you hire a CFO or senior leader, and then they build their team over time and slowly replace some of those service provider components by bringing it in-house, right? And so that is a natural progression that we do see. You can obviously do it the way that makes the most sense for you, but it's good to understand generally what has been the history of hiring, because the people in the ecosystem, whether you're trying to hire them or LPs, we are generally aware of this knowledge now, and it is part of our approach to the marketplace. Okay. All right. So lessons learned from this LinkedIn review that we did. Again, often GPs hire first to complement a skills gap they have. There is no one size fits all solution to this. And just like in startups, you're going to want to lean into the messy middle, the blended roles, right? Giving people an opportunity to prove themselves, because there isn't naturally a clear career path into the back office of a venture fund. And so while you're out there, I just leave you with one last thing that we picked up through looking at hundreds of profiles. There are superpowers and secret skills. And often when you're hiring multifunction people, they'll have their core secret power, but then they'll also have a secret skill that will develop. And it's critical that when you're building these roles out, that you give yourself optionality, you give yourself time, and you make good hiring choices, because they will impact you through the life of your fund. All right. And if you've got questions, we've got some case studies in the carousel below. We're happy to answer questions on them. Those are actual examples of how firms have grown and matured. We anonymize them a bit, but you can start to see the context of how they made decisions and what they were hiring for, as a way of using that as a template for your own decision making. So if you're interested in talking about that, we're happy to connect. As always, Dave at Signal Fund Services, or reach out on LinkedIn. See you out there.